We're in Genesis 46, where we've been for weeks and weeks and weeks through the book of Genesis, the life of Joseph in Genesis. We've been focused in or zoomed in on the life of Joseph. Last week was in chapter 45, where after 20 years, and if you remember the 5 P's that we've gone through this, he began with parents that were dysfunctional into the pit. Psalm 105 that we'll look at in a minute says that they put the stocks on him and they hurt him. And he was dealing with all of that in the pit. And then he went to Potiphar's house, to prison, to the palace. And now in chapter 46, though, we zoom out away from the life of Joseph himself and look back at his dad. Because we're going to divide this into 3 sections, but his dad's 130 years old. And he's practically blind. He has not seen his son now since all this happened. It's been 20 years. He suffered the death of his son, thinking he was dead. And then 11 brothers come back, or 10 actually, because they kept one in hostage. And they come back and tell Daddy he's alive. And he doesn't know whether to trust them or not. But in chapter 46, a whole new turning around about where faith has to go. Listen, my friend, you may be here today and your life may be filled with hurt. It may be filled with disappointment. It may be filled with rejection. It may be filled with pain at the moment. But the very fact that God himself is going to raise every one of us up from the dead, while death may be the worst thing, it's not the final thing. We will overcome all, even death. Because at the end of this thing called life, Paul looks in 1 Corinthians 15, he says, "Oh, death, you've lost your sting to us as believers. Oh, death, where is thy sting? Oh, grave, why do we fear? We have no fear." And so there's this decision-making time. The plan of God is much bigger than Joseph. The plan of God is much bigger than my life. But I thank God that the plan of God includes my life, just as it does you. So let's go to Genesis 46 this morning, where we'll read Israel. Now, this is the name of Joseph. God, in chapter 25, I think, changed his name after the wrestling match. His name was Jacob, and that name meant trickster, supplanter, double dealer. Everything that you can think of, this guy had it in his nature. And so he says, so Israel took his journey with all that he had, and he came to Beersheba and offered sacrifices to the God of his father, Isaac. Now, here's the word. Jacob, you've been told the Pharaoh has got a beautiful place for you. He's going to put you on the east side of the Nile. It's beautiful for cattle and sheep. That's all your family has ever known. It's a beautiful place. But you're going to have to leave where you are. You'll notice the 2 different words here that is given. Israel took his journey. Verse 2, then God spoke to Israel in the visions of the night. And he said, he didn't say Israel. What does he say? Jacob. 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 You remember chapter 45 after 20 and the brothers see Joseph for the first time? What does he scream out? I'm Joseph. Because they did not recognize him and did not know him, and they thought he was dead. And this was 20 years pent up anger and frustration about what has happened to him. And in chapter 46, it's God saying, Jacob, Jacob. Notice this. God gave him the name Israel, contending with God, strength in God. You're no longer the trickster, the supplanter, the double dealer. You are Israel, in God's favor. But when he calls him in his weakness, reminding him, I still know who you are. God knows who we are. He knows in our identity that we're still sinners and that he has saved us from our sin, and it is his grace that keeps us. But he calls him in the weak name. And so he said, I am God. Just like Joseph said in chapter 45, I'm Joseph, I am God. The God of your father, do not fear to go down to Egypt, for I will make of you a great nation there. Let's stop because we got a whole bunch to unpack. The first thing we want to talk about this morning is Israel's decision. Israel, not the nation, but the man. Israel's decision. Every one of you are going to make a decision before you leave here. You say, no, I won't make one. Oh, yes, you will. No, I'm going to close my eyes and my ears. I'm not going to listen. I'm not going to hear. I will not do anything. I will not make any. Yes, you'll still make one, because when you walk out the door and don't make one, you just made one. Every one of us is a heartbeat away from heaven or hell. We have no idea whatsoever. Literally every day of my life, I see or hear of a wreck. Yesterday it was Kentucky. A crazy man standing on the interstate just starting to shoot people. You never know. You have no idea why the world is evil. Why does God allow evil? Because sin is here. Because man is fallen. Our condition, our rebellion has caused every bit of this. But in chapter 46, Israel took his journey, and it says that he took everything that he had, all that he had. He's 130 years old. And he's got a big, big decision in front of him. Because, well, in fact, let's just go with me, if you would, to Genesis 26. This is not the first time there was a famine in the land. The first famine that was in the days of Abraham, and Isaac went to Abimelech, king of the Philistines in Gerar. Then the Lord appeared to him and said, do not go down to Egypt. Now, Jacob, you're going down to Egypt. He says, don't worry about it. I'm going down there with you. But to Isaac, his father, he says, do not go down to Egypt. Live in the land which I shall tell you. Dwell in this land, and I will be with you, and I will bless you. I will make your descendants multiply as the stars of heaven. I will give to your descendants all these lands, and in your seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because Abraham obeyed my voice, kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, my law. So Isaac dwelt there. And verse 12, Isaac sowed in that land and reaped the same year 100-fold. So every seed he put in the ground, he received 100-fold prize for it. That's unbelievable. Any farmer would give his right and left arm to be able to have a 100-fold crop. The man began to prosper. Everyone got jealous. Verse 15, the Philistines stopped up all the wells which his father, his servants, had dug in the days of Abraham. And that's why we bring this up to you, because in chapter 46 where we are, it says that he's going to Beersheba. The Hebrew word Beersheba, it's a combination of two words. It's a well of oath, and it's the seventh well. It means the seventh well of an oath. This is where Grandpappy Abraham went to the place called Beersheba, and there he dug the well. Now, an interesting thing about this in chapter 15 and then chapter 23, chapter 26 is when Abraham dug this well, and well is a life stream. I mean, it's like a Casey's gas station in the middle of the desert. I mean, the water well is everything. Without the water, you got nothing. Only this time, Abraham plants a tamarisk tree. A tamarisk tree is an evergreen. Now, they're fighting. He and the Philistines are fighting. They fought over these wells, and now they still fight over wells, only it has oil in them and not water. But the well was dug, and then Abraham did something different. He got an evergreen tree called a tamarisk, and he planted it right by that well. Why did he do that? I'm thinking all week, no, why did he do that? And it bears to reason. In our front yard at the other home, we have a oak tree that we planted right near 25 years ago. And we used to look at that. It's so small, it'll never shade anything, we saw. And now when you look at it, it shades not only the front of the house, but literally the entire yard. The deer come every night. Oftentimes there's 10 to 12, 15 deer eating the beautiful little acorns that they love so well, and they sneak in and get it. The birds are there every day. Now, why did you plant it there? Because I own it. Why did he plant that there? He was saying to Abimelech, this is mine. Now, there's a big fight about this, and we'll talk about that later somewhere in Genesis 15 about this well. But the seventh well, it's the well of oath. It's the well that Abraham, the father, stuck down the tree and said, this is where I belong. Now, it's interesting that his son, Isaac, comes along, and where does he wind up? He's at the same well, and he's praying the same prayer. He is looking for the direction of God. And the father says to him, I'm the Lord, I put you here. Do not go down to Egypt. You dwell where I put you. Now, fast forward another set of years, and here we are with Jacob. You know where he's supposed to go? He's supposed to go to Egypt. But where does he begin this thing at? He starts at Beersheba, the place of the seventh well, where my granddaddy planted that evergreen tree, where my daddy came and prayed right there. Now, they'd filled the well up, and they fought over the well. In fact, in Genesis 15, a great battle was fought where the kings of the east, the Philistines, they took all the wells over, and they captured Lot, Abraham's nephew. Boy, they're messing with the wrong guy. And this is where you see the first special ops in the Bible. Abraham put together a special forces team. He went in. There were 5 different kings. He kicked all 5 of them out of the country and routed those 5 armies. And he took all of that land back. And he brought his nephew Lot. And he got the wells. And now here we are. The wells have been filled in by the Philistines. They filled in all the wells. This is how much, when you begin to look at the mindset of the Philistines, you see it today in Hamas. This is the mindset of Hamas. I will kill anything that I don't own. Death is victory. Now, death is swallowed up for victory as a Christian, but we don't walk around wanting to die. We talk about singing, dying to self, but not dying physically or killing anyone else physically. But the mindset of the Hamas, the mindset of Hezbollah, all of these groups are the same mind of the Philistine, which is, if I can kill you, I will. If I can take everything from you, I will. If we can plunder everything from you, this is victory. And in heaven, I will receive reward the more that I kill, the more that I plunder. And you see, that's a mindset, my friends, that I do not care who you are. They just killed 6 more hostages this past week, while Israel, in the middle of that, is saying, we will have peace talks, but they wouldn't. Now, here we are, old man, 130 years old. He's at Beersheba, and he's praying. And God calls out to him, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, here I am. And so verse 3, and so he said, I am the God of your father. Do not fear to go down to Egypt. God, would you make up your mind? You told my grandpappy to get out of there. You told Daddy to never go down there. Now you're telling me I've got to back up everything. Now, the Pharaoh's already provided all the carts for his children and grandchildren, all the families to get from Beersheba all the way down to the east side of the Nile. It's going to be a long trip. It's 300 miles. It's six weeks of walking. And he's an old man, but he knows his son is alive. And so he's excited about that, but he's got a big decision, the same decision you and I have to make today. Here's his dilemma. Do I keep that which is in my hand and swap for that which he promises? Or do I just leave everything? Because what is Canaan? Canaan is the promised land. Canaan is the place to go. Canaan was the place they owned. Canaan was the place of the tamarisk tree. We own this. Everything about the blessing of the Jew in the book of Genesis is connected to 2 things, the land and children. Why do I leave this, even though my son is down there? And he makes this huge dilemma in his mind about, do I let go of what I have in my hand? You remember the show? I don't remember who was the host of it, but Let's Make a Deal. You remember that? Let's make a deal. And you got the money in your hand, but wait a minute. What about door number 1, door number 2, door number 3? You can make a swap. And everybody's screaming at him, no, don't do it. The decision we have to make today is not let's make a deal with God, but it's let go of what we are holding on to so that he can bless us inside of the promises that he has for us, even though we already know that Joseph has just said in chapter 45, we got 5 more years of this, 5 more years of drought, 5 more years of no crops. What are you going to do? Will you let go of what you have, what you're holding on to, in order that God can bless you with what he wants to promise you? That's the decision of Israel. Now, Beersheba was the place of the 7th well, the place of the tamarisk tree. The place is a reminder that all 3 generations built an altar and worshiped God at Beersheba. It's as far south as you can go. You've heard the saying from Dan to Beersheba. Dan is in the north, Beersheba is in the south. It's approximately 275 miles. Those F-16 jet fighters that fly from Dan to Beersheba, they do it every day, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. It takes them 22 minutes to leave the country of Dan down to Beersheba and turn around and go right back up to the Dead Sea and the Jordan River and back up on top, turn around, get gas, and they do it. They do it every day. And it's only about 300 miles long. That's the entire trip. But now, the worst part of the journey is in front of him. The Negev, N-E-G-A-V, the Negev desert. This is the worst place. I mean, there's nothing out there. Abraham's well, the last known place of help and water, he's at it. You're going to have to give up what you're holding in your hand in order to get what God has promised to you. Do you see that decision? Do you see what you have to do? If you're in this room today, you have to decide. Why? Because you're hearing the Word, and you're all responsible for what you hear. I'm responsible for what I hear in the Word and how I act on it by faith. Now, what am I holding in my hand? What is it I'm wanting to hang on to that I'm not willing to walk away from so that I can allow Him to keep the promises He has made to my family? Now, if I was 130 years old, I would not be thinking about what I'm holding on to. I would be thinking about all those babies back there, all those grandchildren, all those children, because in just a moment, that's the next big decision. What are you holding in your hand? In just a few minutes, 15 minutes or so, we're just going to say, if you need to come to this altar, you come. If there's something in your hand you need to lay down, lay it down. Doesn't mean you bring it. If it's a car, don't bring the car down here and lay it on the altar. It's not saying that the physical thing has to be here. Your heart has to be here. What you lay down, and we all know that what's in our heart, it becomes the treasure of that thing that we hold on to. And so we're just going to say, listen, you got a decision to make. Are you willing to let go of what you're holding on to in order that you may get what He has promised to already give? And you can say just like I did, but God, why did you tell him he's got to go down to Egypt? Because of the famine. I know, but there was a famine in chapter 25. We just read it. There was a famine in the land, and Isaac, he needed to get out, and you said, no, stay. Did you know that God works differently with every one of us in different ways at different times for different purposes? I was watching yesterday morning, and the ladies' conference was going on over here, and I was on a Christian station for a minute, and had my Bible out and studying, and there was a lady, and she was sitting in a chair here, and she and her husband, they own several Learjets. I know they own 2 Learjets and have 3 different mansions, but they have a good Christian program as well. I won't tell you their names, but I just struggle with all this. I just struggle with every bit. I struggle with Christian television a whole lot. Anyway, she's sitting in this chair, and they're bringing people up to her to the right and to the left, and they tell her, this lady just heard you prayed over her, and this has happened physically. Then on the other side, another one come, and then everyone would applaud. Then I noticed on the other side, completely out of camera view, but it was there, is another line of people, and they're working through these lines, and everybody, yeah. You know what that other line was? People who'd come for prayer and nothing had happened. I called it the other line. The preacher texted me this morning at 5:30. I was already up, but he said, I want you to know, I am praying for your healing by faith. I believe. And I wanted to say, hey, okay, I want to say amen. I am too. What do you think I'm praying? What do you think I'm praying? I've talked to three people in this room this morning who are suffering physically, suffering a great deal. I'm not suffering, not one bit. Not one bit, yet. Here's my point. You may be in the other line. You didn't make it up to the TV screen. You didn't get to tell the good story. You didn't get to tell what just happened. God works with every one of us differently in a different way for a different purpose. And here's what has to happen in that decision. Am I willing to let go with where I am and what I hold in my hand in order for God to bless us with the promise that He's already given to us? That's the decision for every one of us here today. In verse 5, he arose from Beersheba, and the sons of Israel carried their father Jacob and their little ones and their wives in the carts which Pharaoh had sent to carry him. See all this decision making with all these babies he's got? His sons and his sons' sons, his daughters and his sons' daughters, and all the descendants he brought with him. That's the second part of this. Israel's descendants. Israel had a big decision. Yes, he did. Am I going to let go? And I think he looks out there at those carts, and there stands all those sons of his, and there's all those wives and grandbabies of his. If you get a picture of me and Miss Jan, anything that comes through on Facebook in the last year, in the last year, it's going to be us with holding a great grandbaby, either a girl or a boy, to which other grandchildren are now raising question with that. Why do we never see any pictures except for great grandkids? Hey, you've already had your heyday. Yeah, you've already had your picture taken time. It's time for the new ones now. Besides that, you're all in your 20s. Well, I'm thinking my decisions that I'm making and what I'm willing to let go of and what I'm doing is no longer for me. I'm fighting a fight against good and evil just like you are. I'm voting in a fight against good and evil just like you are. With every breath of me, everything that I do, everything that I say, talking about Cole leaving, is Cole to make sure he has a future. Our boys and girls to have a future. It's no longer, folks, just about whether you're a Republican or Democrat. This thing is down to good and evil. This thing is down to what are we going to do as a nation? Are we going to stand in righteousness, or are we going to fall like every other nation in the world? Are we going to rise up to the point that we can say, bless the Lord, O my soul, we are a sinful nation, but we are going to live for Jesus Christ as long as we can. So I make decisions today no longer based on me or my health or my wealth. I make decisions based on all those coming behind me. That's what you've got to make your decisions for. And that's why, and I know people, I know they mean well in your life. They mean well in all of our lives. But sometimes we just don't get it. We've got to lay some stuff down to get out of our hands in order for God to do the thing that He's going to do with us. Let me ask you this. Just what if the circumstance that you are praying God to remove from your life is the very thing that God is using to change you, to get you to where you're supposed to be? See, you've got to be able to say, God, I don't want this. Oh, I know that. But the circumstance you're asking Him to change is the very thing that God is using to form you into who He is wanting you to be. Verse 8 through 26 is the descendants of Israel. Now, don't get bored. I'm going to read you these names. Oh, man, don't do that. I hate names. Oh, listen to me. Now, these were the names of the children of Israel, Jacob and his sons who went to Egypt. Reuben was Jacob's firstborn. You remember him, don't you? We've talked about him a lot. The sons of Reuben were Hanok, Palu, Hezron, and Carmi. The sons of Simeon were Jemuel, Jamin, Ohad, Jachin, Johar, and Shaul, the son of a Canaanite woman. The sons of Levi were Gushon, Kohath, and Merari. The sons of Judah were Er and Onan. Watch those boys. Those are bad guys. They never made it into the promised land. God killed them. Shelah, Perez. Who in the world is Perez? What's his name about, and why is he in there? Zerah. But and Onan died in the land. Perez is Moses' grandfather. You don't think of it like, wow. They died in the land of Canaan. The sons of Perez were Hezron and Hamul. The sons of Issachar were Tola, Puvah, Job, and Shimron. The sons of Zebulun were Serad, Elon, and Jehiel. These were the sons of Leah, whom she bore to Jacob in Padan Aram. This Jacob, he spent most of his life in Padan Aram. He went in there with no idea except to get one wife, right? He wanted Rachel to be his wife. He came out of there 22 years later with 4 wives and a mess. Not because of women. Moving on. Somebody asked me once, you ever watch that, the story on the television? It's got the guy, he's a Mormon guy, and he has 3 wives. Sister wives are called. I said, no. The guy is an idiot. Why would I watch anything about him? Now God says to Jacob in the middle of this, Jacob, do not fear. I'm going to go down with you. Here, in this decision that you're going to make in a moment about, am I willing to let go of what I'm holding in my hand, my future, my plan, my identity, my everything, my money, my house, my land, my kids, all this, am I willing to put those in the hands of God so that He can bless me and honor the promise that He is making to me? That's the question. But you know what? I love what He says. I'm going to go down with you. I'll go down with you. That's pretty good. The Creator of heaven and earth says, I'll go down with you and I'll bring you back up. So don't fear. So he keeps looking at these kids in verse 14. The sons of Zebulun were Sered, Eldon, and Jehiel. These were the sons of Leah, whom she bore to Jacob in the Padan Aram. The sons of Gad were Zaphon, Haggai, Shunai, Esbon, Eri, Abodai, and Ariel. The sons of Asher were Jimnah, Ishua, Ashua, Bera, and Sarah. Hey, you guys looking for baby names? I'm giving them to you right and left. Their sister and the sons of Beriah were Heber and Michael. These were the sons of Zilpah, whom Laban gave to Leah, his daughter, and she bore Jacob 16 persons. Now, if we look at the rest of these sons and daughters, there are 33. Leah has given him 16, Rachel 14. Joseph has 2, Benjamin has 7. As we read, these were the sons, verse 22, of Rachel, who were born to Jacob, 14 persons in all. The son of Dan was Hushan. The sons of Naphtali were Jaziel, Junai, Zezar, Shileam. These were the sons of Bilhah, whom Laban gave to Rachel, his daughter, and she bore to Jacob 7 persons. So now there's 7 more. Benjamin and the sons of Joseph, who were born to him, except in Egypt, were 2. You add those up, you know what you get? 70. 70. You go back to the book of Genesis, chapter 12. Abraham, won't you get out of this country? I'm going to make a great nation of you. 100 years later, there's 70. 70 people. 70. That's all there is. When you think about this, I'm going to make a great nation out of you. Now then, Jacob is 100 years old. The carts are filled with kids. And he's got to go through the Negev desert to get to where God has said, if you'll get down there, I'll go with you and I'll come back with you. How frightening is it to go where God says, I'll go with you? You know? How frightening is it to know, I will come back with you? Abraham was 99 years old when a baby was born. That first son. You know, all that Abraham got, all that was there was 2 people and a promise. I'm going to build something with you. 2 people and a promise. That's all. The descendants of Israel. And they turn into what is now recorded over 1 million. Now today over 2 million. All between 2 people and a promise. You go where I'm going to send you. That's the descendants of Israel. The last thing we look at is the descent of Israel. The descent. In chapter 46, verse 28, then he sent Judah before him to Joseph to point out before him the way to Goshen. And they came to the land of Goshen. So Joseph made ready his chariot and went up to Goshen to meet his father Israel. And he represented himself to him, and he fell on his neck and wept on his neck a good while. And Israel said to Joseph, now let me die, since I have seen your face, because you are still alive. Then Joseph said to his brothers and to his father's household, I will go up and tell Pharaoh and say to him, my brothers and those of my father's house who were in the land of Canaan have come to me, and are men that are shepherds, for their occupation has been to feed livestock, and they have brought their flocks, their herds, and all that they have. So it shall be, please listen to this, please, when Pharaoh calls you and says, what is your occupation? Joseph says, you are to say this, that you shall say, your servant's occupation has been with livestock from our youth even till now, both we and our fathers, that you may dwell in the land of Goshen, for every shepherd is an abomination to the Egyptians. The descent. Egypt is always down. Israel is the highest elevation of the Middle East. Egypt is always down. So he's not just saying go down to Egypt. He's literally elevation going down. It's also always representative of going down spiritually. Egypt always represents the world. What is this about? The descent of Israel. You know what this descent is? We're going to have to go down. putting a parallel together, we are called sojourners, pilgrims, right? Not of this world. This is what the rule is. Okay, you're going in there to Egypt, and God said He's going to go with you, and He's going to be with you, but we want you to know this. It's not your home. You are a sojourner. You are a foreigner. You are undocumented. You are an illegal alien. It's not your home. You remember that. Now, I want you to liken that to who we are and who this world is. I think the problem with American modern Christianity is we have gotten so cozy in the world. We love it. We love the world. And the Word has told us all, listen, love not the world, neither the things in it. Okay, well, it's hard not to. Because everything that the world has fruit on the front end. I mean, it looks good on the front end. We are sojourners. We're not supposed to be at home here. Joseph is saying, you better say this, because you are an abomination. There's another reason that Joseph wants them on the east side of the Nile is because they are an abomination. Did you know that when the 11 brothers came to eat with Joseph, he had to turn his back on him. He would not eat with them because it was against the law for an Egyptian to eat with an Israeli. Have you ever been rejected like that, where somebody would not eat with you, would not touch you because of who you are? Our identity in Christ is so much so that when they look at us, and that's what we're seeing everywhere. Just watch the news all this week. The conservative news things on all the posts and the online news sources are saying, this teacher got kicked out because of prayer. This student got kicked out because of prayer. This school, da-da-da. The football team that got saved and was baptized, they've already fired the coach. Why? Because they hate anything that reminds them of who Jesus is. We are not of this world. We are sojourners. That's what Psalm 105. Let's close out by going to Psalm 105. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, call on His name, make known His deeds among the people, sing to Him, give glory to Him, let the hearts of those rejoice. Seek the Lord, verse 7, He is the Lord, His judgments are all in the earth. He remembers His covenant, which He has commanded for 1,000 generations, the covenant which He made with Abraham, His oath to Isaac, and confirmed it to Jacob for a statute, to Israel as an everlasting covenant. This is the man Israel, Jacob, saying, to you I will give the land of Canaan, to the allotment of your inheritance. When they were few in number, 70, indeed very few, and strangers in it, when they went from one nation to another, from one kingdom to another, He permitted no one to do them wrong. Yes, He rebuked the kings for their sake. And He sent a man, verse 17, Joseph, who was sold as a slave. They hurt his feet with fetters. He was laid in irons until the time that his word came to pass. The word of the Lord tested him. And the king sent him and released him, and the ruler of the people let him go free. He made him lord of his house and ruler of all his possessions, to bind his princes at his pleasure and teach his elders the wisdom. Now, the descent is we have to lower ourselves. We have to humble ourselves. And we're all prideful, right? We're all prideful. Surely I'm not the only prideful person in this room. We are prideful. We don't want to bring ourselves down. But we're sojourners, we're foreigners, we're not to be accepted, and we want to be accepted. We want our kids to be accepted. If our kids have trouble, we're going to go right down there to the hallway and we're going to get this thing, because my kids are going to be treated just as good as everybody else's kids. We all are that way. But I am telling you, part of this sign that we wear as a Christian is we're sojourners. This ain't our country. This is not our land. We're foreigners. And it's a descent. You want to know something that's really interesting about this as we close? And it's this. 100 years before we are at the tamarisk tree at the seventh well, 100 years before that, in Genesis 15. Do you know what God says to Abraham? He says, and I will take your people where they will learn to be a great nation. And you know what he says to Abraham? And they shall be there for 400 years. 100 years before the tree. He said they're going to be there 400 years. God has kept his promise with you, and he's kept his promise with me. Israel's decision, am I willing to let go out of my hand what God has said he's faithful to promise me with? He'll go with me, he'll bring me up, and he'll bring me down. The descendants, those coming behind me. I mean, if you're 50 years old and above, you surely can't just be thinking about your future. You're thinking about surely those coming behind you. What life will be for those coming behind you. And the descent is, we have to understand this world is not ours. It's going to get worse before it gets better, folks. It's going to get worse before it's better. And for those of us who name the name of Christ, our peace is not here. Our peace is there when we get to heaven. And I think that it doesn't matter how you fancy up your death or whatever. I'm to the point, hey, throw a little ditch, open a ditch up, throw me in, roll it up, whatever you want to do. I do not care. I'm not there. And for the believer, that's where we're going to get to. Let's stand together. Our heads are bowed, our eyes are closed. Every one of us must make a decision this day. Some in this room need to say, Dear Jesus, I ask you into my heart this very moment. I ask you to save me. I repent of my sins. What is that called? Being saved, being born again, getting redeemed, swapping my old nature for a new nature. Just like old Jacob, he had given him the new name, under God, in God's reign, contender with God. But he called it the weak name. We have the same thing. We have a flesh. We have a flesh and we have a spirit. My spirit says being in church is all about hearing the word, being encouraged, being a witness, fellowshipping with other believers to remind them that the week may be tough, but Jesus is still Lord of your life this week. The decision is, am I willing to lay down out of my hand and give it to God, knowing that He's going to bless me? How many of you in this room, with their heads bowed, their eyes are closed, just for a moment, you say, Preacher, I'm facing a decision right now. There's a decision, spiritual, financial, job, economics, home, family. I'm facing a decision. And I know that I need to be able to drop out of my hand that my plan, in order that I may pick up and stay inside. Is he going to be faithful to me to keep his promises to me? I mean, I'm 130 years old. Am I going to leave the place that's called Canaan, the whole thing that the whole world's trying to get to, in order to get to the promise that he has made to me? How many of you have a decision to make this week? You don't indicate it, just I'm talking to you. And you know you need to hear from the Lord, to get out of your hand what must be in his hand in order for this thing to work. So, Father, here we stand before you. We're sometimes so beaten down, taken advantage of, frustrated and angry. The world is not going a good way. And we seem to be more mad about our rights than we are about what we owe you. So, Father, help us today to get out of our hands what should be in yours, in Jesus' name. Amen and amen. This is your time.